On today's episode number 31 of the Real Recovery Podcast, we have Dr. David Bohrer joining us. David, a respected chiropractor and recovery advocate, shares his powerful journey from a successful career to struggling with addiction and how he rebuilt his life through recovery. His candid story, filled with ups and downs, offers hope and inspiration to anyone facing similar battles. Stay tuned as we dive deep into David's remarkable transformation and the lessons he's learned along the way.
Hello, and welcome to the Real Recovery Podcast. I'm Julie, your co-host, on this journey of healing and transformation. Together with my co-host, Peter, we dive into the heart of recovery, sharing stories that resonate with courage and inspiration.
That's right, Julie. Each episode is a new chapter in this vast narrative of recovery, and we're honored to bring them to you. But keep in mind, the perspectives you'll hear are for informational purposes only and may not reflect the views of the podcast or our partners.
Indeed, while these conversations can be a powerful part of your recovery toolkit, they are not substitute for professional medical advice. We encourage you to seek guidance from your healthcare provider for any treatment-related decisions.
And if you're facing an immediate crisis, or if you just need to talk to someone who understands, don't hesitate to call the Recovery Crisis Line at 503-223-8569. The number is also on our website. Help is available for 24/7.
Now let's begin our episode
Of recovery, real recovery.
Now he's listening. I never really made much of an attempt. I'd show up at a meeting so I could show my in-laws that I was sober. Because that's going to, hey, look at me, I'm at a meeting.
I didn't want to go back to prison. It was pretty deep.
Well, we're talking here. I just want to introduce myself as Peter, and
Okay.
I'm here with my co-host Julie. And today we have
Dr. Dave.
Yeah.
I'm so excited. Dave is friends with my sponsor, Dawn, who's been on our show. And Dawn hooked us up with him, and we're
it's so
excited.
funny. I never put the two and two together, but I met Don. I had gone out for a little bit and came back to ECAC, and he was at ECAC, the East County Alano Club, for those who are listening, and he's who inspired me to try the Lunch Bunch where I go now. But my first sobriety, and my aunt Rachel Lynn, who just passed away not too long ago, she started her sobriety journey 29 years ago at ECAC.
Yeah.
So small world,
Yes.
Look, 6 degrees of AA
Yeah,
separation.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kevin Bacon's in there somewhere.
Yeah. So
So
we're
welcome
excited
so
because
much.
neither one of us know your story.
Yeah.
So that's going to be
So
amazing.
that's good because I can make it up and you'll never know.
Right? Yeah.
There you go. I'll check with Dawn. No. Or Keiichi.
But I got to tell you what, though, you can't make this shit up.
No.
You can't. It's a movie. Everyone is a movie within
Yeah,
itself.
right.
Mhm.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about you and
But we'll just jump
his-
in. I always like to know, so I like to, when I hear people talk, what's your sobriety date? So it's July 31st, 2009, which is 5,487 days.
I love it.
Yeah.
I did that for my birthday. I had it all.
Yeah, it's pretty
I can't tell you what it was. I can't remember, but it was like
Mine's on my
10,000,
phone.
500,
Yeah.
whatever.
And
57.
there's a couple guys that like I hear a lot in my home group. They'll say how many years or days they have, and they say that I don't say that to impress anybody, but it impresses me. And I always say, you know what? I hope it impresses at least one person
Right.
enough.
Yes.
But if it motivates them to pick up the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous
Yeah.
and get a sponsor and do the things that I do to enjoy the life that I do today, So yeah, I hope it impresses somebody. Whenever I do celebrate a birthday, around that time, I always reflect, like, where was I 15 years ago? And so would you say even from today, 15 years ago today, I would have been 8 days sober, and I was at Hazelden. And I had a single sober day. I now had 8 days at that time, and I hadn't had a single sober day in over 5 years. And as my head was clearing up, I remember for the first time, and it was around this time, it was around that week sober, I actually got down on my knees and I prayed for the relief, the obsession to drink and use. And prior to getting sober, I was going to church every Sunday. I think I'm trying to stay close to God when I'm going. But it was the epitome of half measures. It was the prayer and medication. And I mean, I'd be at church and I'd be high as a kite every day.
Yeah.
But I would show up and I would pray. And I would pray for God to take away all these problems I was having. I don't care if it was the financial problems, the legal problems, the relationship problems, the problems at work, health problems. Pray for the relief of all those things, but never once for the relief of the obsession to drink or use. My prayers were not answered. I thought they weren't. In hindsight, they were answered because no is an answer too. And
I like that.
Yeah, and the thing is, those no answers, sometimes that's the most powerful answer you can get. Because if my prayers had been answered back then, if you could have taken away all those problems I had, all the relationships, all the legal, all the financial, all those things, if those prayers were answered back then, I never would have got sober. Why would I get sober if you can alleviate all my problems and I can still drink and use? Right. And so that was the first time that I actually prayed for that relief. And they, like I say, they never were answered in the way I wanted them to. And I know now too that when I say they're not answered, they're basically this, no, you're not ready yet, or I've got a better plan for you, you know. And but I remember though, once again with a clear head, for the first time, somewhat clear. I'm long-term sobriety now because I'm 8 days, but it was long enough where I at least got a little bit of a clear head. And I remember thinking, man, how did I get here? And how am I ever going to deal with all this stuff? There were so many things going on in my life that it just looked insurmountable. My house was in foreclosure. I was filing bankruptcy. I was going through divorce. I was suspended from work. I just spent 5 days in the ICU after a pretty bad overdose. I lost my driver's license. I hadn't had a legal car in a while. I say a legal car. I had some that were flying under the radar for a while. But so my life was somewhat unmanageable.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. And anyway, so at that time I'm thinking, man, I had it all. I really thought I did. And so I go back in time and think, so how did this all start? And so in the beginning, it was Genesis here. But I grew up in an alcoholic family, very bad alcoholic family, both parents. And my dad now he's 45 years sober now. Wow. My mom, unfortunately, she passed away because of this disease. He got sober, she never did. And I know there's a lot of research that will say so also that when you have parents that are alcoholic, we have a stronger genetic tendency to become alcoholics also. And
100.
But I think also can work the other way and it did for me for a long time, because I saw that the chaos and the turmoil that I grew up in, and I knew that is not the life that I wanted. And so that thought and that fear really kept me away from drugs and alcohol, and for a long time. And I buried myself in school and sports and work, and I was going to college. I got really involved in bodybuilding. I was competing in bodybuilding. I'd won the Mr. Oregon, and I got through college. I graduated at 23. I was a chiropractor, the youngest one in my graduating class, so I thought that was cool back then. I was the youngest one in the state.
Yes.
And then life started getting real good. I got married, and everything that I thought that I wanted, I was getting all those things, and there was absolutely no gratitude for any of it. It was that sense of entitlement. I've worked my ass off. This is the fruits of my labor, and this is what I deserve.
Yeah.
And I tell you though, all my happiness was just rooted in that, having more stuff. And I tell you, if your happiness is based on material things, you're always going to be broke.
Right.
Because there's never enough. And for me, that's the way it was. I want the bigger house, the faster car, the better vacations. Ultimately, it ended up where I decided I needed a younger wife. That was another thing. I thought,
needed an upgrade.
Yeah. Turn in for a younger, newer, shinier model, and got together with somebody way too young, and 17 years younger. And I was 36 and she was 19. That's a big gap. And the years weren't as important as the lifestyle, because it got me into this party scene that I had never been a part of. I'm not going to say I never had a beer, never took a puff off a joint, but for all intents and purposes, I've been sober all my life. Definitely had never done anything. If you ask me how many times I've been drunk in my life, I could easily count it on one hand and have fingers left over. It just wasn't my thing.
Right.
And I was more into this healthier lifestyle. During that time also, I had bought into, as partners in a Gold's Gym, so I had my successful chiropractic practice. I had the Gold's Gym. And so things were going good and on the outside, but obviously something's missing. And so when I got in this relationship, all of a sudden now I'm hanging out with all these young people and they're partying and a lot of drugs, a lot of alcohol. And it was really the first time in my life that I really felt like I had to conform to fit in. I never had done that. I always liked being that outsider guy that I didn't want to conform because my life was good. But so I didn't want to be that old guy out. And then so we started hanging out. And so we're, combination of drugs and alcohol. And it started out, it was just pretty much weekends. And then pretty soon it'd be a few evenings a week and always trying to keep this professional life and this kind of party life separate. And then pretty soon it's getting to be a regular thing. So something every night. And the problem too is these people I'm hanging out with, they're 15, 20 years younger than me. I've established myself a little better just based career-wise and whatnot. So I can afford the lifestyle more than they can. And because that's a shut-off valve. The worst thing you can give a drug addict or alcoholic a lot of times is money. And I had, at that time, I was doing pretty good, so I could afford a lot of the lifestyle.
Yeah.
And so my shutoff, so I didn't have that for a shutoff valve for a long time. And I remember thinking, as long as I don't drink or use in the morning, I'll be okay. And then I started thinking, it's 4:00, but I haven't been to bed yet, so it's still not morning. So pretty soon this professional life and the party life, the lines got really blurred and the overlaps were eventually they're just one and the same. And it was every morning, first thing out of bed, I was doing something, whether it was a drug or a drink. And then throughout the day, I was just totally all day long and thinking nobody notices. It's funny when you look back and all these people you don't think they notice. When you get sober, you find out a lot of them did.
Yeah.
But
same for me. I remember that. And I remember putting those rules together too. I had all these rules that I had to follow and always make sure I shaved before I go whenever, because if I missed a day, I had to look the part. And the same thing. 5:00. First it was only on Saturdays. And then it was Saturdays and Sundays are okay too. And then Friday nights and they just grew.
But it really started escalating. My drinking and using career basically lasted 10 years, but I caught up really quick. And I got to the point where for the last 5 years, and it was a $500 a day habit.
Wow.
And for people out there, if you've done coke and oxys, you know how quickly that can add up, And
Cocaine, you have to keep getting high.
Oh, you do. And then for me, it was that speedball all day long, moving all day between the oxys and the coke. And I just think about it a lot. In fact, I know somebody else just passed away here recently with the fentanyl. Back, if I was out there today, there's no way I would survive because they say it's into 60 to 70% of the drugs out there. So the amount of stuff I was doing, I would have got a bad hit. And I'm scared for the people out there now, because it's...
Same.
Yeah.
And for me, the good thing is I am so scared to use a drug because I don't know where to get them. I mean, I'm sure I could figure it out, but I don't try to,
Yeah, because it is. I mean, it's a whole different game out there now, But I remember spending that kind of money. Eventually, I'm cutting into things pretty good. I still managing to do pretty good at work. I look back and think how I was able to stay relatively successful, but business-wise. But anyway, so again, that's just feeding into the habit. But eventually the money starts running pretty dry. I'm burning through my savings. And I remember going one day I had to go make the nightly run and it was $400. And I went to the ATM and I punched in the $400 and the message comes up there. Says, continue, you may have insufficient funds, fees. And I thought, shoot, I've never seen that message before. I didn't have a clue how much was in there, but obviously it wasn't $400. And so I thought, shoot. So I punched in 300 and it gave me the same message. And I went down to 200 and I got the same message. 100, same message. Then I hit the fast cash, the $40 button, and it gave me $40. I thought, okay. So I hit it again. It gave me another 40. No messages. I hit that 10 times and I got my $400. And it didn't give me any kind of warnings or anything. The next day I got the notification. Every one of those cost me $37.50. So I got my $400 and it cost me $375 to get it. Apparently when you're doing the fast cash, they think you're in a hurry, so they don't want to slow you down. But what it did though, I realized then that I could do, and I can't remember now if it was $500 or $1,000. They allow me to take out above and beyond what I had. I thought, so anyway, so I'm living on tomorrow's money all the time now, and every day it's going down and getting what I can. And it was crazy. One day, a guy that I used to hang out with quite a bit, it's interesting, we have known him for 40 years. We worked out together, we competed in bodybuilding together, and we did a lot of dope together. So we've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. But I remember he was at my office one day, and I remember pulling out my bank statements, and there was 10 months, I had 10 months worth of bank statements, and there was not a single month that had less than $2,200 in fees for non-sufficient funds. And there were several that were over $3,000. And I remember thinking, if I could just get this below $2,000, I think I'll be okay. That was my lofty goal. I was just going to keep it below $2,000. Crazy. But it made perfect sense at the time.
Thing to keep going.
And I kept thinking, I wonder why they're not closing my account. I'm their best customer. Because ultimately, eventually, I'm getting paid. And then I had a lot of issues with driving issues. And fortunately, I think there was a couple of accidents where I hit other vehicles, but usually it was trees and poles and mailboxes and stuff like that. But I had totaled 7 cars, and one of them I bought back. And I had a buddy who had a body shop, and he fixed it. And then I totaled it again. So I had 8 total cars. And one time I was driving down to, it was late at night, 11 or something. And I don't remember what I was doing, but some kind of a downer. And I thought, something pepped me up. So anyway, I make the phone call, and I'm going to pick up some kind of stimulant, whatever it was. And I went up over a curb and hit a mailbox. Actually, it was 4 mailboxes that I hit that were on a post. And as I went over the curb, and I thought, shoot, I got to get out of here. And so I drove home, and it was probably only a couple miles, but on 4 flat tires. And so I get home, and I don't know how much time had passed. I was pretty loaded, but knock on the door. A police officer out there. And he said, "Is that your car in the driveway?" "Well, yes, officer, it is." And he says, "I think you forgot your license plate in front of the mailboxes you hit."
Oh, no. Oh, wow.
And so anyway, they charged. Now, I didn't get a DUI. I've been home quite a while now, so I think legally, I think it's hard to get a charge like that to stick at that point. But he did write me up for 4 hit and runs because there was 4 mailboxes.
Oh my God.
So I get an attorney who's actually in the program, and good friend of mine now. But because I can't have this on my record, I would lose I'm not even worried about my driver's license. I think that was already suspended anyway, but my license for work, because any kind of conviction with, even misdemeanor could potentially lose my license. So he's going to represent me. And we went to court. It had to be at least 8 or 9 times go to court. And he kept getting these continuances, and I don't have a clue what's going on. But finally, the last time we went there, we're walking out, and I said, "What's going on?" And he says, "They dropped it." Oh, okay. So I don't know how I think he got the right judge, but
yeah.
And they have to, like you said, it was a lot of time. They
Yeah.
have to get you within a certain amount of time.
So they have my fines and things to pay. I remember the people at the mailbox, they wanted restitution for their mailboxes. And the 3 of them, they wanted $50. And the other guy held out for $200. But my attorney's fees were over $12,000.
Oh.
Once again, I had enough to pay for that. So again, those kind of things would just led to my sense of invincibility, because I was having stuff happen, but I was getting out of it.
Yeah.
I was hanging out with guys. There were so many people that I was running around with. The majority of them, they've lost their jobs, their houses, their cars, their wives. Unfortunately, there was several that had passed away. And I'm thinking, none of this is happening to me.
You're doing good.
I'm doing good. I'm bulletproof. And until I started having some health issues, basically. And I just ignored them, but I knew something was up because I could not walk across the room without stopping halfway to catch my breath. I was getting swelling in my ankles and getting a lot of heart palpitations and things, And I got up one morning, and I remember I couldn't even get up and walk to the bathroom without catching my breath. And I didn't even have the energy just to even stand up and pee. So I thought, I'm going to sit down. And I'm sitting there, I'm looking at my ankles, which do not even exist. There's so much swelling.
Yeah.
and which is not a good sign. And I remember I called my doctor that I had at Providence. Anyway, she said, "Hey, you need to get into the emergency right away." And I can't. I got to go to work. And no, you go now. Anyway, I went into work and I called my buddy, the one that I'd been hanging out with, and I told him I was going to go. I got some people, I'll see a few patients, and then I'll go down to the hospital. And he's calling to check on me throughout the day. And I said, "I told you I'm going when I get down here." Eventually he calls and I don't answer. So he comes to check on me, and I was there at work, passed out on the floor.
Oh, wow.
And I think I'd been down for maybe an hour, just looking at how my schedule was. And so he took me in, and he goes, "It was a tough thing to do. What am I going to do?" Because he knows there's going to be some issues with this, but he's not going to let me die either. So we get down there to the ER, which I have no recollection of any of this. But I ended up spending 5 days in the ICU, and I had congestive heart failure and atrial fibrillation and a lot of heart issues. And
how old were you?
This would have been the year before I got sober. So it would have been, in 2046.
Wow.
Yeah. I remember I'm the guy that's competing in bodybuilding, in good shape, owned a gym, and I spent the 5 days in there. And I remember when I came around and they were giving me, when I was in there, I remember they were giving me OxyContin. I thought, cool. They know I need. And so I didn't know. I know now they didn't want me going through withdrawals in there. And unbeknownst to me, and I don't know why, but I should know these things, but they'd done a whole battery of tests. And those, that needs to be reported when you're in medical, reported to your state board. And so I didn't, if I could say, for some reason, it never dawned on me. But I got a call probably within 3 days after I was in the hospital. And they asked if they could meet with me. Oh, of course. What can I ask? What for? And they said, has to do with some lab work you had done when you were in the hospital. So I thought, oh, shoot. So I met with them. And you tell you what's tough is I'm showing up there and I don't know what cards they're holding. I don't want to lie. I don't want to get caught in a lie, but I don't want to tell them things they don't know, And
that's such a sticky situation.
Yeah. And so he asked me about, because there was a whole list of things that had shown up on this, on the lab work. And the first one he asked me was about cocaine. And I said, yeah, the craziest thing. It was the first time I'd ever done it. And the guy said, first time? I said, yeah, I can, yeah. And I said, yeah, and I don't know what I was thinking, but that was it. And he goes, huh. So how big a line do you think that was? And I said, it was probably about, my fingers holding like maybe an inch. I said, I don't know how you guys measure this, but about like this. And he says, huh, because based on the lab results, it looks like it's more like this. And he holds his arm 3 feet apart. And he says, and there's long-term damage to their heart that probably did not happen from one-time use. And then kidding. And then all the other stuff too. And then I didn't know they'd already had some issues, complaints. And so they'd already been following me. They're investigating, and I didn't know this, but 2 days later, I think it was, I got a letter or basically a cease and desist. Shut your doors immediately. License is suspended, and which was the worst thing that could have happened. Yeah. Because now I'm thinking, what am I going to do now? That's what made me who I was. And I think men are maybe worse than women. I don't know. But that's what we identify as. That's what. Yeah. And it's, wow, you're taking that away. And now I have no income. I can't finance the lifestyle anymore. Yeah. So I'm calling them to see what do I need to do. And the first thing they said is you need to go to treatment. And I said, okay, so I'll go to treatment and then I get my license back. And they said, no guarantees. When they said, except we'll guarantee that if you don't go to treatment, you will not work. And they required me to go to Hazelden. That's where they have a program for like medical people. And of course, that's the most expensive place in the state at the time, probably still is. And so they said I had to go there for 30 days. And I fought them on that. I was looking for a cheaper option.
Yeah, quick fix.
I'm out of money now. In this 1 month, they're talking $27,000. And I was like, shit, I got $27,000. I wouldn't have a problem right now. But they wouldn't budge. They wouldn't accept anything else. And I was running out of options. I was asking my dad. My dad, he refused multiple times, and because he knows, he's been around, he knows people like this typically aren't good investments, And I think finally, at the urging of my brother and sister, he did reluctantly loan me the money. And so I got into Hazelden, and when I finally got in there, leading up to the time going in, I had a couple, I think it's about 6 weeks before I was able to get in, and I still hadn't gotten sober. This started out in February, and I didn't check in until July 31st. So a lot of it was fighting with them over trying to get a cheaper option. But even when I did finally get the finances situated, I didn't quit using, even though I wanted to show them, I wanted to go in there because I know they're going to UA you when you get there. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to find out the half-life on all these drugs so I know how long I can take these things so I can pass the UA. And so I've got it all down, and I've got it pretty well figured out. And then as those days started approaching, I thought, shoot, I could probably go another day if I just drink a lot of water to flush it out.
How our minds try to convince us and trick us.
And,
oh my gosh.
Then I wasn't drinking much then. It was all pretty much drugs. And then my one buddy said, you ought to just this last week, you should just drink because you don't have a problem with alcohol. Okay, yeah, okay. So I started drinking. That week I drank 100% alcohol. It was all day long. I just want to feel different. And so when I went down, the first thing they do is they check you in, and anyway, they do the blood work, and then they went there going to give me the breathalyzer, and I said, oh, I don't need to do that because I don't have a problem with alcohol. And shut up and blow. Okay. And I was 2-0, and they said, apparently you do have a problem with alcohol. But what it did, though, it did really reinforce to me now. And, so I'm in there it's supposed to be the 30-day program. And I remember we started working on doing the steps. They said they wanted us to finish the first 3 steps before we could get out. And I'm on step 1, and I'm putting all these things about how unmanageable my life was, and I don't have a problem with that. I do not want to say I'm powerless. 100% not powerless, because that's a sign of weakness in my mind.
Great.
Yeah.
What I know today is that knowing that where I'm powerless is actually my strength.
Right.
But at that time, I did not want to admit that to anybody. I keep getting all these things back on the paperwork on my first step. I get red ink, refuses to admit he's powerless. And finally, I thought, shoot, I better I'll play the game. I'll tell him I'm powerless. And anyway, so I got on to step 2, and I fit into step 3, and then it's getting close to my 30-day time, and then I'm informed that typically when medical people come here, it's a 90-day program. So they got me under the pretense of a 30-day, and they'll bait and switch on me,
Oh, wow.
And I said, you don't understand. I can't. I'm out of money. And they said, can't you get a second on your house? No, it's actually in foreclosure, so probably not. And I've exhausted my alternatives. And they were relentless. And I'm getting frustrated because essentially at that point in my life, they're my higher power because they're calling the shots for me.
Right.
I say they're my higher power because at that point, the only thing I'm concerned about is getting back to work, And finally, I asked them, I said, so I've got to ask you, and I want you to be honest with me. And they said, of course. I said, are you more concerned about my sobriety or getting more money for me for another month? And they said, absolutely more concerned about your sobriety. I said, well, let me stay for free. And it turned out they weren't that concerned. So we put together a exit plan. And I put together all the things. I don't know if I really thought I'd do them. Probably didn't, but I knew it was going to look good. Yeah. And I knew a lot of people in the program already. It's funny because I was hanging out with all these guys years back. They were all sober, and I hadn't started yet. So they're living the same life as me. I wasn't in recovery, but we're all sober. And so I knew these guys in recovery, and so I knew where to go. And so that was part of the deal too. So I'm going to go to meetings. I'm going to get a sponsor. I'm going to do the steps. I'm going to do service work. There's a recovery program at church. I'm going to do that, all these things. And when I get out, and then the first thing was I had to do 90 meetings in 90 days. And I remember showing up at meetings, and I really didn't want to be there. I really thought initially, once I got out of treatment, I was going to get back to work because I'm 30 days sober now. Come on.
Hello.
And so I had a lot of other things I had to do first. And so anyway, so I started showing up at meetings, and I'm sitting in the back because I don't want anybody to see me. And then, of course, I'm going to a couple of different meetings, but I'm there every day. So people get to know you. Yeah. And I remember all I ever did was if I did get called on, and I hated getting called on because I'd sweat and cry and just not comfortable. And I thought, man, why is it so hard for me to talk? I had done I'd done a lot of public speaking over the years in front of large crowds, much bigger than 30 people in an AA meeting. And it was because when I'm at those events, I always knew I'd get different seminars on nutrition and exercise, and I'd emceed events, but I always felt like, and not in an arrogant sort of way, but I knew more than anybody that I'm talking to. That's the way I had to go in, knowing that I had the answers if they had questions.
Right.
But in sobriety, I didn't know shit. And so now I'm in a very uncomfortable situation because absolutely nothing about sobriety. I know a lot about getting high. I could tell you which drugs to mix and which ones not to and what the half-life is of these things. But as far as recovery, nothing. And after a meeting, the guy comes up to me one day and he said, there's a lot more to this program than just getting back to work. And I said, you don't know me. And he says, yeah, I know you better than you know yourself. And I said something really eloquent like, fuck you, and,
As we're known to do.
and what's interesting now, he was totally at 100% because like when new people come in, I know them better than they know themselves because I've already lived your past.
Yes.
And you have no idea what your future holds for you. But I do. If you do the program, I know the potential of this program. They don't know that. So I
know if you're full of shit too.
Yep. So, I still, though, I was reluctant to get a sponsor. I was on step 4. I didn't want to do it. You hear the horror stories in the 4th and 5th. And so finally, a sponsor kind of got appointed to me. It was somebody with long-term sobriety that would not be a guy that I picked. Actually, it's a long story, but it's shorten it up. But when there's another guy I know that I'd met when I was at the gym that was in the program, in and out, but he was in the program, and he was a former NFL player. Actually made the Pro Bowl one year, so he was an established athlete. Wow. And I won't mention names, but when they told me that the sponsor they had in mind, it was the same name as this guy. So but my buddy tells me we're going to go meet him, I'm thinking we're meeting the football player. I'm thinking that's going to be great. I'm going to have this NFL player as my sponsor. That's cool. Yeah. And so this guy, he's the football player. He's this 6'7" black guy. We go to meet this football player at Starbucks. And then my buddy who knows who we're meeting, he just had never said anything. He goes, oh, there he is over there. And I'm looking around. I'm thinking, I'm not seeing a single black person in here, let alone a 6'7" black guy. And then we go up and walk up to this guy and what? That's not. And so anyway, so that was how I got introduced to my sponsor. Now, if I had known who I was going to go meet, I might not have gone. It's one of those God shots, how God works. Because it turned out it was the best connection for me. And I remember telling him that I've been leery of getting a sponsor, black or white. But I said, because I'm on the 4th step, and I remember I'm nervous. He says, so don't worry about it. You're on the 1st step. And I said, no, I've already done that. I've done the first 3. He says, no, you haven't. I said, I did them in treatment. He says, you're starting over because I do not believe that you truly believe that you're powerless. I thought, how do you see right through me? And what a blessing though, because he was 100% right, And if we hadn't gone back, I don't know if I would have stayed sober or not. And he had told me then, which I fully understand today, and I don't know if I did at the time, but he said that when people go back out, it's typically because they have not done a thorough first step. And what has a really deeper meaning to me today, because I know if I've done a thorough first step, then I know that I'm powerless and I will never regain that power. So if I go back out, the only way I'd go back out is if I thought I somehow had regained that power. Because otherwise, I will not pick up or use because I know where it's going to head. I know where that's going to lead me to. And I don't know how long it's going to take. It might be tomorrow or it might be a month, but pretty soon I'm going to be right back where I was. And it'll probably get worse. And then I'm probably going to die because fentanyl's out. But so I get it now. It's that. And when I see people, and in the beginning of that, of beginning to think that have regained the powers, that we don't need you people anymore. We don't need our recovery. I don't need to go to meetings.
It's the first mistake.
That's it. I don't need to do service work anymore. And I can tell you today that I do the same things today that I was doing 15 years ago. And we all know, we see it all the time, where you see guys that can be with long-term sobriety, they start getting out of the program, and usually it starts with not going to meetings, and it doesn't work out too well usually. But that's that first step of believing that we've regained the power. I need that daily reminder. I still go to at least 5 meetings a week. But I need that reminder, you
Ditto.
know. And
It's medicine.
yep, and it's a small price to pay.
And it's free if you don't have
there
any
you go.
money.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah, so when I got sober, the first thing I wanted to do was get back to work. And I had a list of all these things. That was first and foremost. It did not happen that way. And once again, thank God it didn't, because if when I started doing the steps and if the first thing I got back was getting back to work, I wouldn't have continued to work the program because I've already got what I came here for. And then once again, I would have started building my life. That would have been the foundation once again of my well-being, was me as a human being. What I need is my job so I can have all these things back, the material things. But not happening in my flawed timing, but instead of God's perfect timing, I started getting things back. The first things I started getting back was relationship. And then an important thing for me too with the relationships, be able to discern which relationships you don't want back. And because I really thought that I just want to get everything back that I lost. And one was I wanted to save my marriage, and I'm not blaming her. That's just the path we went down together. But anyway, it quickly became apparent that's not going to be healthy for me to stay sober or her. And so that was one relationship that I let go of. But now though, as I start building these relationships and with friends, family, and my higher power, and now when I've got that foundation, then things started happening. It seems slow at first, and I tell you that, and that's why I think we lose a lot of people. I think as a whole, typically alcoholics and drug addicts are not patient people. And I think society in general, and addicts and alcoholics probably even more, we live in this microwave society where we want things now. And typically anything worth having is more of a crockpot speed. And so I know for me, anything worth anything, I did not get it overnight. And
it's like in our addictive mind, we would like a pill that would
exactly.
make everything happen.
Exactly.
Like that.
As I went through the steps, and when I first got sober too, I went on another stipulation of my getting back to work. I had to do UAs for 5 years, and honestly, when I first got sober, there may have been some days that might have been what saved me, thinking I might have a UA, because anytime I would
accountability.
Yeah. But I did everything that I was asked to do. I did the steps, did a lot of service work, and went to all the AA functions, and then I started getting sponsees, I'm sorry, and just really built a life where it was revolved around recovery. And things in my life, really, everything that I would hope for, I got so much more than I ever thought I'd get, and way more than I deserved for sure. And it was when I saw people go through a lot of stuff. I remember when I was in treatment, one thing they asked us about was they wanted us to write down something or things that we might possibly drink or use over. And we all had something on there. Oh. And they said that at that point, we still all had what they called conditional sobriety, and then I will stay sober unless, and the biggest things that most people had on there was usually the loss of a child or a spouse, things like that. But so when I was in my first year of sobriety, there was a lady with a long-term sobriety in one of my meetings that I go to, that her daughter had passed away from the disease. And I watched her walk through that, and it was powerful. It was tough, but she stayed sober through that. Yeah. But that's when I realized, you know what? We can get through. Yeah, we can get through this stuff.
And some days, things that are so minor will affect you. And make you wanna.
Yeah, when you talk about that, it's not a lot of times. Yeah, it's not the big things; it's the little things.
Breaking a shoelace, they say.
Yep. And so I'm watching as I'm continuing my recovery. I got out of treatment now. I was a month in there, and I got back to work middle of November. So I was August, I was in treatment, September, October, and then half of November. So 2.5 months since I got out of treatment that I was allowed to go back to work. And things started going really good. My business was good. And we ended up ending the marriage. And then I met somebody in the program. And I always teased her that she had 13-stepped me because we met I knew her from before, but we got together in the end of January, I believe. So I'm like 6 months sober. And
You did break the rule.
yeah, the thing is, though, there are no rules, right? She maintains that she always said that she would not date somebody unless they'd gone through the steps, they had a sponsor, and they're still going to meetings. And so I checked all the boxes. And I know people with long-term sobriety that don't check those boxes. So it's more the quality. But then a couple of years later, we ended up getting married. When we first started dating, I have one son. He's 36. And then she has two, a daughter 36 and her son is 39. I say her son, he's my son now too. And I remember telling her when we first got together that it was important to me that if we're going to be together, I want a relationship with them too. And she had said, don't expect much for a while because they've been through a lot, like most of our significant others and kids and things are. And so anyway, we had, me and her kids, we had developed good relationships. And I'll never forget the day before we got married, she sends me a text message. It said, I can't wait till tomorrow and I can finally start calling you Dad.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and those are the things you don't forget. And that's the stuff that doesn't happen if I'm drinking or using. Yeah. And those relationships are so important to me, and I still tear up when I think about it. And
we talk about how successful you've been and stuff. The most important things, right? Sponsoring,
100%.
family relationships,
Yep.
a good work ethic,
Yep.
your word, keeping your word. They don't cost any money.
Yep.
They cost.
Yeah, that's the most important thing. I used to hear people saying I thought they were full of shit, but I 100% agree now that for me, if you could take all the material stuff, you could take it away. And today I can tell you I'll still be okay. As long as I stay sober and have that connection with my higher power, I'm going to be all right. And I can honestly say that I don't want to lose this stuff, but I will be okay. And I couldn't have said that before.
Right.
The one thing I know when I was meeting early on with my sponsor, I used to ride my bike over to his house because it was a while before I had a driver's license. Apparently the state doesn't think people like me are really good risk on the road. and so I rode my bike over there and we go upstairs in his office and we do step work. And I remember early on, at this point, I remember not even knowing if I was going to stick around. I'm jumping through the hoops. And I have my big book, my AA big book, that when I went through treatment, I read things and stuff, but I was careful. I didn't want to bend the pages because I knew when I got out, I was going to go down and sell it, and there's no dog ears, there's no writing in the margin. It's mint condition, And then, so when first time I met him over at his house, he told me to bring my big book. Okay. So I'm in there complaining about all these things that I want. And he says, let me see your book. And he grabs my book and he pulls out a pen and I thought, oh, don't write in it. And he wrote in there, time takes time. And I remember at the time thinking, that's really profound. But of course, now today it makes more sense. But so I ended up keeping that book. And a lot of times people talk about going to treatment, they got the $10,000 big book. And mine was the $27,000 big book. And I'm a numbers guy. I can tell you right now, that was the best investment I ever made.
Yeah.
The return on investment was huge. And it's you can't even put a price on it. And then I was thinking of speaking of the 27,000, I had started paying my dad back. I'm jumping around here and apologize, but I'd started paying my dad back over a few years. And it was on one of my, maybe it was three years and I can't remember. But anyway, my dad had come by and he's the kind of guy you'll end up doing anything for you. He doesn't want you to forget about it. Remind you, remember when I did? And he'll give every birthday, you'll get a card. They're never sentimental. He never writes anything in there. Just at the bottom of the card, you'll say Dad. It's never love Dad, just Dad. And there'll be a check in there. So I'm paying him off. And I think I was down to, I don't know. I think I was down to around 5,000 maybe. Yeah. And put a good dent in it. And then, so it was like I said, I can't remember what birthday, but it was a birthday. And he knew that, a birthday. And so he stopped by my office and he gives me a card. And I open it up and there's a dog in the front wagging his tail. And then it says, congratulations. And then you open it up and it says, you did it. And then he writes in there, my dad writes it, which he never writes in cards. And he said, I'm proud of you. No more payments.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, the no payments things was cool, but have somebody say they're proud of me.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's one of those things too. You don't forget.
Especially for somebody who doesn't write in cards.
Nope. And then
Yeah.
it said dad. But and so somebody who was reluctant to loan money to me in the first place.
Yeah.
But so anyway, so it's part of gaining that trust back.
Yeah.
And,
And to know that a lot of times, and I know for myself, I didn't realize the hurt or the effect that I was having on my
Sure.
family. It was all me. I'm doing
Yep.
it to myself. You guys aren't affected by it.
Right.
And yet we find out later in sobriety
Oh,
how
yeah.
much they
Yep.
were affected and how much it means to them to see us healthy and sober.
That's why I always say too that people say we need to get sober for ourselves, which I understand. But I also know if I'm just getting sober for me, I know I rolled the dice on that, thinking that it's going to be okay this time. So I need something more than just me. And for me, it's family, because I know when I'm sober, there's a lot of people around me, their lives get a hell of a lot better.
Right.
And I don't mean that in arrogant like I do so much, but just the fact that they don't have to worry about me.
Yes.
If they
I
can't get a
don't
hold of
disagree
me,
with you.
they're not worried that I'm in an alley someplace. So that's, for me, that's my why.
My daughter,
Yeah.
I have a 32-year-old, and luckily she's never seen me do a drug. But for me, it was keeping my freedom, not going. I just went to AA to get off parole, and then decided to stay and wanted to be a good mom. And then somewhere around I don't know. I wish I really knew when it was, because I don't know. But somewhere around the 9th or the 10th year, I thought, this is pretty good. I've
Yep.
been doing this for a while.
Yeah.
And I think the most important thing, other than being a good mom, was for the first time, and I do mean the first time in my life, there was people I trusted. Being an only child, I didn't think like you did with your dad. I thought she deserves what she gets because of what she did to me.
Yep.
So I'm being serious. I didn't get over the resentment of my mom just until 2 years ago. And I realized she was an alcoholic and did the best she can, but it took me a long time to get there. The good thing is, I didn't want to drink because I too smelled the alcohol, and she'd parade me around in bars because she was a bartender, and I couldn't stand it when old men came up and said I was cute and they smelled like alcohol. So I did drugs instead. But it does, I do think that it is you, but someone else makes it even more powerful.
Sure. Yep.
Because I never wanted my daughter to see me like that or be like that. I didn't do it for my mom, but she was pretty grateful that I got my shit together. Yeah.
Yeah, tough burden to carry for a parent, It's watching our kids killing themselves, With my sponsor, thinking about in our meetings at his house, we spent a lot of time up there in his office, and it was still early on. And I remember sitting up there with him. We walked out of the office, and there's a little mezzanine, and we're standing up there, and I'm looking down there, and he saw that I was tearing up, and he said, "You okay?" And I said, it really just struck me that, I've blown the opportunities where I'll probably never have the opportunity to have a nice house like this ever again. And he says, you stay sober, stay connected, and keep working the program. He says, you'll be amazed the doors that'll open for you. And boy, it was about 4 or 5 years later, I was married then, and we were renting renting a house on the river, which was nice. But my sponsor moved to Desert for a few years down there. Anyway, we bought his house.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's where we live today. And it's a beautiful home that I never thought I would have an opportunity again,
Look at, and it was that homie. And how
Yeah.
cool is that?
That is.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's where we're at now. And then we've built a wonderful life together, and it's all built around the fundamentals of this program too.
Your foundation.
Yep. And we saw people going through stuff, and I remember thinking, man, we've been so fortunate. We see everybody going through stuff. We've really been fortunate. We haven't had any major stuff. And then she gets diagnosed with cancer, my wife. And boy, talk about a kick in the gut. It was non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and it's stage 4. And tough times and things like that. I've seen it work both ways. It can destroy relationships or it can strengthen them. And I tell you, I was there. My son, when he was 19, had cancer. He had a sarcoma, malignant tumor that was almost 5 pounds. He had surgery, and his treatment was radiation. My wife's was chemo. And I remember that was when I was at the peak of my addiction. And I was present there. Yeah, I was there, but I wasn't present, I should say. And so I had the opportunity to actually be there this time. And then it got me a chance to see also, she has some really amazing people in her life too in the program, and how she never had to be alone unless she wanted to be. And there was people there all the time. I mean, there was people that helped so much. There's so many appointments, and it was hard for me to get her to all of them. And then my sponsor helped out a lot. And it's funny, one time he had taken her to, and it was a better part of a day that she'd be there. And so he was going to go and sit there and wait with her. And then I was going to come midway through the day. And then when I got there, I talked to the people up front, and they were talking about her dad. They'd seen him a few times there, and all along they thought that was her dad. But that's the kind of relationship they have. So
Can I tell you, my dad died at 15, and he was in New Hampshire, and I was here because my mom had moved me, and I'm an only child. And I swear I did not have a dad until Dawn. And my first sponsor, I took him to meetings every Friday. He didn't get sober until 76, and he died at 99. So then at some point in time, I brought meetings to his house. And it was crazy. When I got Dawn, was the hardest time I've had in the program. I got sick. I'm in MRIs, and Dawn's rubbing my foot. And I felt like for the first time in my entire life, I had that support that I really needed. I didn't need my first sponsor in that way. The program, and I looked up to him, and he taught me about having trust. But Dawn, and we came here 2 years ago, because we've done 2 of them, for Father's Day. And Dawn came with me, and I bought him a Father's Day present. And it was the first time I ever celebrated Father's Day. And I'm, 57 years old, and it's the first Father's Day I ever celebrated. And I know that's not the relationship with every sponsor and person, but for me,
it's your family of choice.
it is. And my family of choice is, again, I'm an only child. Peter's my brother from another mother, and I love his mother. And it's just, I've been blessed.
It's the beauty of this program, how connected we can be because of the shared experience.
Yeah.
And the big book says you never have to be alone again.
And that's
So I'm glad your wife had that
And
support.
I always say too that one of the biggest blessings of the program is that we don't have to do anything. Of course, we get so much more than that. But I tell you, if I got nothing else other than, that's worth the price of admission right there.
Yeah.
So everything else is a bonus.
Exactly.
And so that's huge. Over time with my wife now, she's been in remission now. Boy, what has it been? I should know the numbers. Things blend together, but it's 6 years maybe remission. So she got through it. She's doing great. And she was beautiful when she was bald.
She matched you.
I told her I was just proactive, and I just shaved my head before her. Yeah.
That's
But,
awesome.
and it did. It was one of those things though that brought us closer, and got through that. And then, of course, the next major thing for all of us was with COVID. And we actually had been down at Lincoln City back then. We spoke at the meeting in 2000. It was March of 20. And I remember leading up to that, of going down there for the speakers meeting. We didn't know if there was going to be meetings or not. There was all the talk about shutting things down. And as of the day before, Friday before the meeting, said, we're still on. So we drove down there and we had a meeting. It was a good meeting. But then the next day they shut things down. And from that time, so it would have been in the second week in March of 20, our world's changed, and it was, I think that arguably for most of us, it's the most stressful times we've been through.
I lost my 20-year job.
Well, so
in August of that year, my 24-year sponsor died, or 23-year sponsor died. 3 months later, and during COVID.
Oh.
It was some shit.
Yeah, there was a lot of stuff going on, And the thing that made things worse, it's as we're going through the most stressful times, and when we need this program probably more than ever, as a whole, we did less than ever. A lot of it because we didn't have the access to meetings and whatnot. At least not meetings as we know and love them. But I'm huge on routine. If there's anybody that knows me, they're going to tell you anything about me, they'll tell you that it's routine. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to keep the same routine. I go to the gym every morning. I'm there by 4 o'clock in the morning. Of course, the gyms are closed, but I've got enough stuff at my office where I could work out. So I was still getting up at 3 in the morning, and I was working out at 4 o'clock. And then fortunately, I was able to work. We didn't have to close down. At noon, I was doing a Zoom meeting. Not my favorite, but it's still a meeting. And
we still have them.
Yep.
It's crazy they haven't gotten rid of them yet.
I know.
Yeah.
I do one still. I go to a noon meeting Monday through Friday. And there's days when I get really busy and it's going to be hard to get out of my office. I'll click on a Zoom meeting, and I probably once or twice a month I do. And it's the one that I do it's out of San Diego, and they still get about 80 people for a noon meeting.
We get 30 to 35. I Zoom host a lot.
Yeah.
And the same thing when my work has been very busy and I couldn't drive there on time, going to an evening meeting and then taking a service position, Zoom hosting, no matter what. If I'm too busy with work, I'm going to get there because other people are waiting for me to let them in the room.
Yep. So, yeah, so there's really no excuse now,
I agree.
And so I don't get out of my routine. Now, I know in the last couple of years, especially this past year, I've been busier than ever at work. And then that's where I've got to be careful because we've seen it a lot. People, when we start I got to keep that balance. And usually for a lot of us, the first thing that when we get tight on time, we start skimping on our recovery. And I like to break things down for me into the 4 F's: the faith, fitness, family, and finance.
I love that.
The faith, I include my recovery in there. And then, so that's huge. The fitness for me, fitness and health, that's been a huge part of my lifestyle. And it's for me, if I don't have my health, nothing else. I can't enjoy the rest of my life. That's huge for me. The finance, it's easy. I've been at times where, that starts to take up too much time. I could do it right now if I'm not careful. Just gotten so busy. But I know today that if I start putting too much time into any one of those things, I'm having to borrow it from something else, And so
I started at a new company.
Yeah.
And for the first time ever, 25 years sober, I worked too much. Didn't have the urge to use, thank God, from all the years I had been in the program. But I had a mental breakdown and had to go to IOP sober.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I got to keep it. So keeping that balance really comes down to staying on my routine, And so I've got I know that I'm going to that noon meeting, and that's also only one part of my recovery, but that's where it all starts. But unfortunately, there's times when I'm dealing with patients and then they show up late, so it's more common for me to be late to a meeting than to be on time for a meeting. And I always tell people I might not be on time, but I'm never late because there's, like they say, the only meeting we're late to is our first one, But it's because even if I'm 20 minutes late, I still show up, and inevitably I'm going to hear something I need to hear. And the biggest part for me, it's still that reset for the day. It's if I don't go, it's just the day. It just doesn't seem. So that's really important. And so if I stay on my routine, and I know people ask me a lot, sponsors and other people, because I'm up. My wife gets after me because it's getting earlier and earlier all the time because I'm running out of time in the day, so I just get up earlier. So now it's 2:30.
No, I'm just going to bed. That's my.
And I thought I'm an early bird at 5.
And then people ask me, how do you stay so motivated to do this, to get up and go to the gym and do your recovery? How do you stay motivated? I said, it's not about motivation, it's about discipline. Because if you're relying on your motivation, you're going to fail. Because there's days you don't feel like doing it. So what do you do on those days? You do it anyway. And so to me now it's the point where even my wife, she says, isn't there days you get up and you just don't even, you feel like just crawling back into bed? And I don't know. It's not, I don't even, it's not even
not
an option.
Yeah.
And, I've always been that way. And the things like, I went, I always say, if we spend half the energy in our recovery as we did in our addiction, we're going to do pretty good.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
Because I tell you, I was very dedicated for in my addiction, and it didn't matter what cards were stacked against me. I'm going to get what I need. I'm going to make it through. Yeah, and and then when people say they don't have time for a meeting, when you hear these, really, so an hour a day. And again, I'm talking about meetings because I know there's a lot more than that. But if you just spend an hour a day on recovery, shoot, I remember getting up every morning when I was using and plan out the day, and it all revolved around my addiction. And I remember getting up though every morning, and I would think about, I'd stress every day about what shoe was going to drop that day, and it could have been legal, it could have been financial, it could have been relationships, it could have been my health. All these things, and people talk about how most of the things we worry about never happen. I'm going to tell you, when I'm drinking and using, all those things happened. So today I don't have to do that anymore. And the biggest thing, I don't wake up every day now with that sense of impending doom.
Yes.
And because I know today, it's going to be a good day. And I don't have bad days. I really don't. And it's been a long time since I've had a resentment. I can honestly say that. I was listening to, actually, it was Matthew McConaughey. And he was talking about, he's a real spiritual guy too, but he was saying how every day before he goes to bed, he wants to make sure he doesn't leave any crumbs behind. And he says crumbs come in the forms of regrets, remorse, and resentments. Said regrets over things that we didn't do, resentments over things that you did to me, and remorse over the things that we wish. And so if I can go to bed with leaving no crumbs behind, the next day I can start out with a clean plate. And then if I don't clean those messes up, tomorrow I'm starting out with yesterday's problems. So I try to live that way, and a lot of it too is the resentment
powerful.
things.
Yeah, it's a great philosophy.
Yeah, and the resentment.
I would like to say that I'm like that, but I'm growing, but I'm not there.
Yeah.
Work in progress.
You've given
Yeah,
me
me
some
too.
inspiration.
I look at things, the resentments, and it's really, for me, as much as I love and care for the people in my life and stuff, there's very few of these people that are going to ruin my day. And it's typically, if I've got an issue, I'm angry, because we know resentments are just unresolved anger. And so if I have anger, justified anger, what am I going to do with that? Okay. It's either, for me, it's one of two things. I've got to either talk to the person, we got to resolve this, or I've got to just decide, you know what? It's really not worth it.
Yeah.
And usually it's not worth it.
With resentments against people, they aren't getting any of what you're going
No.
through. And I had to learn that. I just recently got through one that was very powerful and strong for me in the last few years. And it was like, I was going through all those sleepless nights and all that anxiety and all that frustration. That person didn't even know. It didn't give it a second thought. So why was I doing that all on myself? Yeah. And it's
sometimes it's about your expectations.
Sure.
Too. Yeah.
Yep. The thing is too, if we have resentments, especially against people that we really care about, we don't know when their last day or our last day is going to be. And I had a patient that recently that his dad unexpectedly passed away at a pretty young age. I think he was just shy of 60. Unexpected, I don't know the details, but him sharing with me that they hadn't talked in over a year. They had an argument over something, and he goes, I don't even know what it was.
Wow.
But we were both too stubborn. We're carrying those resentments, and he says, and I don't even know what it was. And so he passed away, and I never got a chance to talk to him. I don't want that because we don't know. I don't know if I'm going to make it home today. Of reality, it's just so I want a clean slate.
I like that. No crumbs.
Yeah. So
I really like that.
So I try to live that way. It's important to me, and because I think most of us in recovery, we have lived a life of resentments, and
I do not disagree with Like I told you, for me, it was a little, I held on to some of them like it was a life preserver.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's how I live my life. And today I just have this amazing relationships with uh, my higher power, with my wife and my friends. And my friends are my family now too, you
Yeah.
know.
We know.
And some of them that are like the really close. I like the thought how we have tiers of friendship. We have that inner circle, those people you can go to for anything.
Yeah.
And I think of even Jesus had his inner circle, Peter, Paul, and John, that inner circle. And then we have the next tier. But it's good to have those, the ride or die, the people that you can go to for
No matter
anything.
what,
And you know,
yeah.
no matter what, that they're there for you.
Amen.
And I have those kind of relationships, and it's to me, it's more. I'd rather have 4 quarters than 10 dimes. Yeah, and I've got those kind of people today that I know if something's going on, I don't have to go through it alone.
I have
Yeah.
to tell you, they call that, I took a class recently, and they call that recovery capital. And I will tell you, despite opportunities that I've had in recovery, my recovery capital, I'm a billionaire. I'm like you. I have a strong foundation. I know who I can go to, loyal people that only just want me to be good to go. They don't want anything else of me.
Yeah, those. I had in my when I was in my addiction, I had a lot of friends that were with me because of what I could do for them. I had the means a little longer than most of them. I had a patient that's a limo service. So I had him on retainer. So we'd go out in the limo, and I had so many friends who would love to sit back and ride in the limo with the expensive champagne. But I tell you what, there wasn't too many of those people sitting next to me in the bus when I got sober.
I understand. In my usage, I had a lot of money as well. I got arrested with $250,000, and I promise you, the people that I associated with before, I still to this day do not have one friend from before. I had to start again. And I'm grateful I was able to
Yeah.
put them in the past because it helped in my sobriety.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's we talk about the whole thing, changing your people, places, and play. It's because there's some we can save some relationships, but if it's been built around partying and drinking and using and stuff, those typically aren't going to be relationships that are going to work in recovery. You know? And I know a lot of people try it.
Yeah.
Doesn't work too well. So and I'll tell you, maybe we'll close with this, but today the prayers that I used to have, the foxhole prayers, every night when I go to bed, because I was told a long time ago that if you want your prayers to be powerful, the first thing you want to do before you ask for anything, thank God for the things you have in your life, the blessings you have.
That I do.
And when I first got sober, I remember I thought, shoot, I don't know what I'm going to thankful for. My sponsor said, you're sober and you're alive. Let's start with that. So then the list started to get longer and longer, and then I was always falling asleep before I finished my prayers. And I remember there's a pastor, and I'd said, man, I can't make it through my prayers. I fall asleep in the middle of it. And he says, there's not a better place to fall asleep than in the arms of your Father. And
my gosh.
I thought, that's nice. And then, but I really shortened it up. Now it's like when I go to bed, I say, I thank God for the second chance that's given me the opportunity to enjoy the things that I do today. And please let my abilities match my opportunities. And could you please continue to bless me in the best way that will enable me to bless others. And that's where I start, because the opportunity, when I thank God for the opportunity, and I know for me it's a reminder that it's just an opportunity. I cannot sit back and think this is all going to happen like by osmosis, like we talk about.
You have to do the work.
And you got to do the work. So the opportunity means I got to do the work, and the work comes in the form of the steps, comes in service work. And I'm big on service work.
Me
And I always think if I've been given a second chance, for me to think that it's all for me is very self-serving and ignorant, but it's an opportunity where I could reach out and help other people inside and outside of the program, And so I try to do that, and I do a lot of that with my sponsees. And it's pretty powerful when we go out with, there's a new guy that we took him out with us when we were, we do feed some homeless people. Anyway,
I actually heard.
so one of the guys has been big in this. And there was another new actually is my friend's, another friend of mine in the program, sponsee. And the guy didn't even speak English very good, but we were talking, and I told him, as we were talking about going out, I said, some people wonder why do you reach out to the homeless people? There's a stigma with that. And I told him, I said, I think part of it, why, because I was just one more bad decision away from being that guy.
Yeah.
And he said in perfect English, I was that guy. And it was so it really hit him.
Yeah.
I was that guy. And then he proceeded to tell me how much it meant to him, how when people like us would stop and just acknowledge them and make them, they get dehumanized a lot. And there's a lot of stories out there that
We know.
Yeah.
Trust
And it's good. So that's been a big part of our thing in service work that I do with my sponsees is we go out and do that. And that's, for me, that's the biggest part of staying humble too, going out and helping others.
Being
And
grateful for what
Because
you
we
have.
could have been, or some of us have been, that person.
I stayed in hotels, and recently we did the story you listened to, Jack, and Jack was like, was your name on the lease? And I said no, and he said, then you were homeless, and I was like, okay.
I've been told that by my wife too, because I talk about being almost homeless. You don't have a home address, you were homeless.
Exactly.
Yeah. I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. I take it this was normally what you'd be at the club having a meetings.
Yeah. And so I figured this would suffice for a meeting today.
There you go.
And it's
recovery.
going to help someone.
I hope just one person hears something that'll motivate them.
I'm going to tell you, you already got your one person.
There you go. Then it's been worth it.
It is. And as I add more structure in a positive way and not a business way, you said some great stuff. So that's the best thing about this. We had a story this week, and for the first time, I realized that, I'd been through some shitty stuff, but so have some other people. It made me feel closer, and it was really good. Every story, honestly, we hear it helps my life. I think maybe even more than theirs.
And I think it's important we share our stories. I have new sponsees. They'll ask, they have a hard time sharing, and I did too. I didn't want people to. I didn't want you people to know how bad I was. And because he'd ask, how do you do that? And it's the longer you're sober, the easier I think it gets to share your story. Because when I came in, all those things I've been through, they're these big old open gaping wounds. But now I can say those have all been healed up with scars, which is a sign of recovery. And so I could share those things. And so if you are new and you're going through some stuff, just know that is your story, and your story could save somebody's life. So do not hesitate. You never know. When I was new, I remember I had a guy come up to me after a meeting, and he said, you said something at a meeting 2 weeks ago that might have saved my life. And I thought, what did I say? So you don't even know.
You don't.
Yeah.
And it can be from a newcomer, an old comer.
Yeah, exactly.
You never know what you need for that day until you hear it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think the other thing I had to get in my mind was there was nothing I did, nothing I went through that someone out there hasn't had it just as bad, if not worse.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
Well, thank you again. Really,
Thank
really
you
appreciate
so much.
All right.
being
Appreciate
here.
the opportunity.
This is Peter,
This is Julie
and you're listening to Real Recovery Podcast.
with Dr. Dave.
All right. All
Thank-
right.
thanks.
Thank you guys. All right.
Thanks for listening.
And that's a wrap on today's episode. Thanks to each and every one of you for lending us your ears and hearts. Your engagement is what fuels our passion and keeps this podcast thriving.
We cherish the moments we share here and hope they resonate with you, whether you're on a daily commute, at the gym, or just taking a moment for yourself.
Make sure to head over to our website at realrecoverypodcast.com. While you're there, subscribe to our newsletter for the latest insights and uplifting stories from our community delivered straight to your inbox.
Click that subscribe button on your favorite podcast player too, so you can keep up with every new episode. It's your support that keeps our conversation alive and meaningful.
And if our stories have touched you, consider using the donate button on our site. Your contributions, no matter the size, are deeply appreciated. They help us continue our mission of sharing hope and healing.
Join us beyond the podcast and follow our journey on social media. Find us on Instagram, Facebook, and on X, formerly known as Twitter. All the links are on our site, so you can stay connected and be a part of the Real Recovery community every day.
Your likes, shares, and comments not only spread the message of recovery, but also remind us that we're all in this together.
Until we meet again, remember that recovery is a journey, not a destination, and we'll be here to accompany you every step of the way to recovery, real recovery.
Thanks for listening.